Hi, guys. Welcome to another episode of the book review series with Fixigawa Security. And we hope you're having a great weekend so far and all the plans you have regarding your goals, your aspirations, and all your dreams. You're able to meet up with those goals and aspirations as well. So, on today's episode, we'll be talking about a book which is not the traditional book we usually talk about when it comes to cybersecurity and offensive security, because we decided to make this week's episode related to structure when it comes to newbies getting started in the profession cybersecurity and all they need to do to get that visibility, or should we say that first job landing, which they need to have as an offer to get started with the industry in terms of their job market. So we decided to read a book for this month's episode and of course analyze that book to see what information that will be helpful and as well useful for newbies who are just getting started with cybersecurity and want to have detailed ideas on what to do to boost their resumes or boost their social network and profiles, so that whatever organizations that is interviewing them for any prospective job will be able to see that they have at least a substantial amount of knowledge to work for them or be assigned that position which the organization they're applying for the job has to offer. So today's episode is going to be a short one because the book is not something too technical that requires an in-depth information, but it's also a book that is a necessity, especially from a general perspective on how we read this book and understand the conceptualized information that was described in this book. So we hope that after today's episode, whatever information we have to convey would be a reason for you to look into purchasing not just the book, but also reading about the book and ensuring that whatever vital information or interesting descriptions that could help you to scale into the industry regarding cybersecurity, you'll be able to use those information and as well strategize more different methods that you can apply this information to make yourself known, or should we say to display your skill set regarding the structure of the description the book is talking about. So with that being said, let's get started. So on this month's episode of the book review series, we'll be talking about a special book known as Learning GitHub Actions and Automation and Integration of Continuous Integration and Continuous Deployment or Delivery with GitHub. So this book was written by Brent Laster and it goes for about $43 for the hardcover copy, if we're not wrong, and for Audible I think about $45. And it's a very interesting book in the sense that it has a detailed descriptive illustration on GitHub Actions and auto-scaling with continuous integration and continuous delivery or deployment of code base. So why is this book very interesting or very important for everyone, especially those who are into software development or who are into building open source tools, is that with this book you can be able to collaborate with people who are interested in adding more ideas to your repositories, or should we say your open source tools, which you intend to publish. Or let's say you have an organization where you employ a lot of persons that work for you. You can also use the knowledge on how to implement various security levels and how your various GitHub actions and auto scale in terms of automation process workflow is executed. So you cannot be a cybersecurity professional who designs open source tools without learning about GitHub Actions. So to ensure that you do not just only build tools, but also have the flexibility to collaborate with others and also securing your code in terms of not allowing malicious code to be deployed in your repositories. The learning of GitHub Actions is a necessity because at the end of the day, you wouldn't want to have that distraction of continuously monitoring your tools in terms of various releases that these collaborative persons are pushing into your repository. And that's why you would need to learn about the GitHub Actions, because with that, you can auto-scale and automate your process and workflow. So for certain repository that have been pushed into the master branch, you can be able to set some security levels like code reviews, code automation before deployment, and verifying that this code actually functions without, any failures impacting the master branch, or should we say the master repository. Furthermore, why this book is interesting is because Brent took his time to, narrate the whole explanation on deployment in terms of containerization, security in terms of code security, and how to continuously integrate into your master code, or should we say the master branch, using this GitHub Actions and automating these processes without having our presence being there to monitor, these various processes that will be pushed in terms of push and pull requests on your repository by various collaborative teams or persons that are, part of that project. Furthermore, this book has a visual representation with code snippet on GitHub Actions. So there are a few code snippets that were used, to describe the workflow, to describe a step, and of course, predefine GitHub Actions that you could use when building your automation process for your CI and CD. So Brent took his time to explain every of those things, providing images, which of course a visual representation, and art sketches, or should we call diagrams, describing how jobs, are executed in a repository. Also, the book contains information about the GitHub marketplace, where you can see various GitHub actions that has been created by persons and are left out there for free for you to use. While he also described about this GitHub marketplaces, he also explained about using these runners on GitHub or self-hosting your own infrastructure and installing these runners to execute in your environment. So this is based on the factors that for GitHub, setting of these runners to execute them are free, but after the free time or the execution time for the free allocation has been exhausted, you have to pay based on the operating system you're running these runners. So if you're intending to run these runners on GitHub on Mac OS, the price varies when compared to running these runners on Linux or Windows environment. Also, various default spending limits were explained for you to understand the cost, that is charged in US dollars. And these are based on the type of, or should we say the tiers of GitHub account you're using. So for free, for enterprise, these are quite different, which this book precisely in a very descriptive manner explained the spending limits and how usage rounding are calculated. Furthermore, Brent also explained about artifact and actions management. So these are based on how you can manage the storage. For artifact management is a convenient way of managing your storage and sharing of your artifacts. Okay, but it's not part of a package management. Then for GitHub action management, here it's talking about the framework for creating and using actions to automate almost everything that you have in your repository, or should we say in your code base, and as well incorporate that based on corporate or enterprise environment. If you do not intend to, make those repositories public, or you don't want anyone or everyone to be creating and pulling, in actions on shared repositories. Then also about cron jobs, the book talks about cron jobs for single and multiple events response. And this is explained in terms of branches, how it is done, in terms of tags, in terms of specific scheduling. So when we talk about scheduling, we talk about cron jobs and the limitations of how to use these various tags, when you want to specify the cron jobs in terms of the job scheduling or specific scheduling. The at is not, specifically used when you're using those GitHub Actions. They have their own syntaxes or code concept of writing, job scheduling when you're performing GitHub Actions. Also, for runners and workflow files, it's properly explained, as well as its encoding and the importance of how these are created using YAML. So basically, every of the automation process, or should we say the GitHub Actions you're going to be doing, you have to learn how to code them in YAML, because that is basically the file, or should we say the default file script that you have to, specify these various actions to execute when dealing with GitHub. So other things that the book also explains about how to incorporate with Jenkins, if you know about Jenkins, and how it is being used also for containerization, Docker. The book described that in depth. You would have a proper understanding, which takes us back to the descriptive explanation on deployment and continuous integration as well. So you have to understand how this is done. Then you will learn about the default GitHub tokens and permissions. So for permissions, the read write, and based on the various GitHub actions, default tokens and permissions. Okay, so this was described in the book because you have to have an understanding related to these various tokens and the permissions they have, because you don't want a situation whereby certain actions should have a permission which is not right. So for example, you create a certain action to have read, but unknowingly you left it with a default action which is read and write. So what it means is that if someone could gain access to that repository, they can be able to, append a line of code into that, and of course, put something malicious which can impact your infrastructure. So this was properly explained by Brent Laster in this book. And in a very, very descriptive manner, you will learn a lot of things about GitHub Actions that could, make you understand how you can automate your code flow, especially if you're into open source or software development, without having any difficulties. Now, from a cybersecurity standpoint, why you should read this book is that as you build projects, you will need collaborative efforts from people around the world. And of course, these people cannot, be in the same geolocations as you. So GitHub Actions is one of the concepts you have to learn if you really want to collaborate with others. Secondly, why you should also learn GitHub Action as a cybersecurity professional is because when you are into offensive security or red teaming, you want to understand how things work and what are the things that are supposed to be and not to be. So for example, like we said, the default GitHub tokens and the permissions they have. So if a certain token is not supposed to have a right permissions, and you studying a code base and you discover that specific action or tokens has a permission which is not supposed to have, we can find a way to exploit it. And if you can able to successfully exploit that, you can report that as a bug to the organization you're testing their infrastructure, or you have the permissible right to test for security weakness that exists within their organization's technology. So this book is not just a book, it's a book that you should get to learn about automation, how continuous integration works, how continuous delivery works using GitHub, and of course, learning how to create a YAML workflow, and of course, automating your processes, especially when you're dealing with large projects or enterprise projects or large code base, you intend to deploy in your infrastructure, or in such cases as a free and open source tools in a collaborative manner. Now, on the 3 key points that makes this book unique is that first, it describes in depth explanations with visual representation. So there's nothing as beautiful as reading a book and you can be able to see images of what is being explained. And that is one good thing that Brent Laster did. It is quite impressive and quite unique for the book. The book is quite voluminous, I think about 400 pages or so. And these images are part of what contributed to that. So he did an amazing job and it's quite interesting. And you should get the book to, get exposed about GitHub Actions. On the second concept is that it is structurally written with hints, descriptions, and with clear images. So when we talk about structurally written, we're talking about a book that follows a sequential manner. So first of all, you're getting acquainted with the basics, understanding how GitHub Actions work, what GitHub Actions are, technical terms were explained, then how runners works, how this various billing concept when you're using the GitHub Actions are being executed by Microsoft, of course, the owner of GitHub, especially when you're not on the free plan anymore, or the free minutes that is given for the free version of using these runners on GitHub itself. Also, the hints there basically talks about things you need to know, things that you should be aware of, and describing them of why they are, or why these need to exist when performing your automation concept with CI and CD. And the last, or the third key point that makes the book interesting is that most of the explanation comes with documentation, references, and citation. So basically, the author explains certain things and, of course, provided reference links you can click on to read more about them, on the official GitHub documentation to, expose you or give you insight of what the author is talking about in the book. So this is a very good concept of writing the book, especially for those who are newbies or getting started with GitHub Actions. And for those who are also professionals, you tend to gain insight about how everything is, from the basic to how everything works, how it is implemented, how to use other actions that has been created by others, and how you can also create your own actions, based on the custom, processes you want these actions to execute. So today on general rating score, we have 2 general rating score. The first one is on general IT rating score for software developers, for DevSecOps, and so on. We would rate this book a 4.98 out of a 5 because it talks a lot about important or interesting things you need to know about CI and CD when it comes to GitHub Actions. And from a cybersecurity standpoint, we are looking at 2 concepts here. The first concept is that if you intend to build tools and you have to involve others in a collaborative manner, then this book is for you to know how to use GitHub Actions. Then the second point from a cybersecurity perspective is that if you're into offensive security or red teaming and you intend to test for vulnerabilities on GitHub repositories or code bases that you come across belonging to organizations, then this book exposes you on how everything works, especially when we talk about tokens and permissions. So this will give you insight of things you have to look out for when, testing, or should we say you have the permission to hack an organization and you search their GitHub repository to see if there's any security weakness that you can exploit as an initial foothold to gain access to the organization's infrastructure. So reading this book will show you, or should we say, expose you to how GitHub Action works. And with that concept, you can now look out for the things that are not meant to be, which were mistakenly, implemented, and of course, find a way to exploit them. And of course, when you find those type of security weaknesses, you have to report them as a vulnerability. And what else? If you're entitled to a payment of a bounty, then you can earn from that. So there's nothing much to talk about this book. It's quite interesting. It's quite an interesting read with lots of illustration. So if you intend to get this book, just head on to our store section on fixitgateway.com. Click on the buy now on Amazon, and that's going to take you to official Amazon website. And that is with our affiliate link as well. And you can get a copy. And with that, some percentage of the commission gets to us. So get this book, read it, practice. You can set up a GitHub account and use the free versions of the minutes that's given to free accounts to test these runners for those that are free. But you should know it has limitation. That means you have to make your repository public and others having access to it. That's one of the downside of the free version. So get a copy, read and understand with your own perspective and not from our own perspective. And whatever you can obtain from that, you can use that as a launchpad to expose yourself more about GitHub Actions by reading the official documentation from github.com. So that is it for this week, and we hope that you would take your time, get the book, read it, and use whatever information you get from it, continuously practice, and of course, implement whatever knowledge you gain from it. So with that being said, we're going to round up this week's episode. Until next time, see you and bye for now.